Today we're going to work on doing the equation of a hyperbola. Okay? Right, so remember what's going to be given to you is just the sketch. And from this sketch you're going to have to go and see what we need and what we have to do. Okay? So, again, when you see the sketch, identify what graph you're working with. Okay, you must see this is a hyperbola, so you need to know that the general rule for a hyperbola is y equals a over x plus q. This is what you should do in a test. Write that down. You should know, make a note for yourself that that is the asymptote. So we know that q is going to be plus 4. Okay, and then A just tells us which quadrants it lies in. So this one is lying in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. So that means that A is going to be negative. Okay, so A is going to be negative purely because we're sitting in the second and the fourth quadrant. Okay, just wait. Okay. I don't know why that point isn't given. Just hold on. Okay, this must be a 5. Okay. Right, then in order for us to go and calculate our value for A, remember I've said to you now, it's like I'm repeating myself over and over. We can't go and calculate 3 variables at once in an equation. We only need A. We've got Q. Q is 4. And we get that from the graph, it's the asymptote, the horizontal asymptote. So our problem is x and y. And we know that x and y is a coordinate that lies on the graph somewhere. Okay, and do we have a point? Yes, we've got 5 and 0. 4 is the asymptote. 4 does not lie on the graph. However, this point lies on the graph. So I'm going to go and substitute 5 and 0 into my equation. I'm going to go put, I'm going to put this in x's value, which is here. Okay. And I'm going to put y value, which is 0, in there. Do you see how we then eliminate all other variables except for a, which we can then calculate. Okay, so just fix that on your worksheet. This should be a 4, not a 0. Okay, we now solve for a. We take this plus over and it becomes a minus 4. So we've got negative 4 on the left and we've got a over 5 on the right. In order for us to isolate a, we are going to multiply both sides by 5. 5 disappears on the right. A is going to be equals to negative 20. It confirms now that my graph lies in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. Do you see quadrant 2 and quadrant 4? Therefore, remember, finish it off. Tell me what your equation is. My equation is k of x or y, it's the same thing, is equals to my a value I've calculated, which is negative 20. And my asymptote is 4. Okay. Right. Now for each graph, I've now explained domain and range, axis of symmetries, and so on and so on. This one has got the same. Right, let's move on. Let's look at our range of k. So let's go back up here. Now range, we're looking at the y value. So you place your ruler on the y-axis. Okay, so do you see this arrow is telling me we're going to negative infinity? Okay, so this goes. All real numbers up to my asymptote. And then I jump over the asymptote and then my graph continues. So my range for k is going to be y is an element of real numbers, but it cannot equal to 4. Y is an element of real numbers, but y cannot equal to 4. This 4 is your asymptote. Okay, this is your asymptote. Yesterday I told you that a hyperbola has got two axes of symmetries, a positive one and a negative one. So if I had to ask you in a test, give me the equations of the axis of symmetry, you're going to write down y is equals to x plus q, that's the positive one. Y is equals to negative x plus q. In q, you are just going to go and substitute in your asymptote. And my asymptote is 4. So my two equations is y equals x plus 4, y equals negative x plus 4. Alright, then for the next one, the equation of the asymptote. The equation of the asymptote is here. Okay, but now in the test, I'm not going to say y equals 4. I'm just going to give you a number there. And you must know that it's y equals 4.
Why did they write
Equation of equations of the asymptote. Okay. But now remember, in grade 10, okay, remember when we were sketching, we've got two asymptotes with our hyperbola. We've got the one that will be drawn in for you and the one that doesn't change this year. And that's this one as well, hey? X equals 0. And the same with, so that x equals 0, don't confuse it. X equals 0 line is an asymptote for hyperbola, but it's the axis of symmetry for parabola. Remember, when we fold it over that y-axis, it's the axis of symmetry for parabola. Okay. Okay, another example. Here it's given. Okay? Right, so what graph do we have here? Okay, it's not linear, it's not a parabola, it's a hyperbola. My general rule for parabola is y equals a over x plus q. Do we have q? Yes. Okay, my q is? Okay, negative 2. But while we add it, that's our first asymptote. Our other asymptote is also there, we just don't see it. Charity's here. Okay, so I'm going to just write it in there for myself just so I know. Okay, x equals 0. That's also an asymptote. Okay, so we can straight away go and substitute in our asymptote in a q. Right? Do we have another point to go and substitute in at x and y? Yes, we do. We've got negative 2 and negative 4. So in x's place, I'm going to go put in negative 2, and in y's place, I'll go put in negative 4. Okay, solve for a. Take that minus 2 over, it becomes a plus 2. Minus 4 plus 2 is minus 2. Times both sides by negative 2. So a's value is positive 4. Remember, after you have found your values for both a and q, rewrite your equation with both variables and finish it off. So my equation for this graph is f of x is equals to 4 over x minus 2. The reason why they use f of x is because on the sketch, they've labeled my graph f. Okay, are we all fine with that? Not so difficult. We do the same thing over and over for each graph. Okay, let's have a look. So it says, give us the equation of the axis of symmetry with a negative gradient. So we know we've got two axes of symmetries, right? We've got the one that's positive, and we've got one that is negative. So they only want this one. Okay, so in q's place I go put in the asymptote, which is negative 2. Okay, question. So here in the equation, okay, so if I had to go and substitute y equals negative x, it's a plus, but my asymptote is negative 2. So do you see it's going to make it a negative? Okay. Right, then, okay, I'm going to leave it at that.